When it comes talking about this stuff, I can talk about it all day. Business, talk about it all day. I'm quite awkward because I've gone so far to this side where I've stopped being socially, I don't know the word for it. I'm more socially inept. Does that make sense? So what I'm saying is, instead of trying to force the method, you learn that way. You learn this stuff unconsciously, then I'm going to bring it conscious to your consciousness so we can drill it in. And then you want to let it go and allow it to come unconsciously. And it's what I've said in ACH all along, that you just have to trust whatever comes out of your mouth is the right question. Those best questions you're looking for the hypnotic interview come out and you think, oh my God, where the hell did that come from? That was awesome. It wasn't you doing it. It was the other you. Okay. So I mentioned this before, and again, I'm guilty of this, looking for a question. What do you think that would trigger if I'm doing this with a client? Or I know I want to ask a client a question. Let's say Courtney's my client. And I go, so Courtney, what I'm curious about is, what could I be suggesting right now?
Doubt. You have no idea what you're doing.
Right. And it might be totally wrong, but she's allowed to judge me any way she wants. Now, you can do this strategically the way that Erickson would do it. He would pause on purpose and just stare at his clients and make it really weird and awkward. But that works. That's another thing altogether. But looking away, there's no need to look away. You've got an unconscious mind sitting in front of you, and it's picking up on 90 to 95% of the things you're doing that you don't know you're doing. And this is really advanced stuff. There's no other trainers talking about this. They're just talking about, instead of saying the word the, change it to and that'll be hypnotic. Whatever. Hypnotic insight. What else? So script is a big one. The notes, unless you have to take them legally, Fiona, what are you taking notes for? 95, 97, 99% of the stuff is just fluff anyway. Okay. What else? Leaning forward, just be aware of that. Umming and ahhing is fine. Don't worry about that. I do that a lot. Stumbling over your words, I do that a lot. Swearing, who cares? What else might trigger the insight?
Getting emotional.
Yeah,
say something that trigger you, and then you get like teary eyes. So they're crying and you get teary eyes. Then that I don't know.
Yeah, it's true. You remember I've always said, just be careful of the niche you pick, that it's maybe not too close to your heart. And it might be nothing to you, but it might be a lot to your clients. Remember, what you're presenting to your clients, they might take it as a suggestion that Courtney doesn't seem to know what she's doing. She seems a bit nervous. Should I be nervous? Remember, this is stuff that's happening unconscious. And then all of a sudden, Courtney's trying her best and putting on the rapport. She's still casual, but her client's starting to get defensive. And what does Courtney do to try and enhance it? Sits more forward, more hypnotic language. Then she resorts back to, fuck, where's my script? Where's my script? I'm freaking out. They start freaking out. You start freaking out. You're screwed. Make sense? Anything else you guys think you might do?
I sometimes swivel in my chair like this.
I do that a lot. I don't know if you guys can see this. I'll try and find some demos where we've got the actual camera on me at a live training. But people used to say this to me, like the students, they'd say, you sway a lot. So when I was really in the zone, I'd do like this with my client. I don't realize I'm doing it. And then they would start doing it. But the point is, I'm not trying to do anything with it. I don't even know I'm doing it. Other people have said I scratch my nose a lot because it's fucking itchy, because I've got the aircon on. They think that's a suggestion. It's weird things like this that may trigger something. Okay? But Jordan, if it happens naturally, fine. But don't go into it thinking, I'm going to start swiveling here, because swiveling means, and now you put a conclusion to it, gets really bad then. What else?
Scott, can the hypnotic fascination, like without blinking and sort of staring at someone, can that trigger the opposite sort of thing? Like, what are they looking at? That conscious mind kicking back in?
Yeah, it just, and this is one I've sort of played back and forth with to bring up. It works really, really well if the intention behind it. This is one thing you should force a little bit, okay? Because it has more positives than negatives, okay? If you're doing it to try and do something, you'll screw it up. And I mean do something like, I'm going to hypnotize you. But what you can start to think and feel to some extent is, I just really want to pay attention to what you're saying. That works. But again, you've talked to a friend before and you got eye contact. When did the eye contact start? It just started. Does that make sense?
So really it's the attitude behind the intent.
It's the non-verbal stuff. It's the gritting through smiling, a smiling mouth and being jealous at the same time. Smile means one thing, but people can hear it in the background. You really don't care about me. Okay. Like, yeah, I just won the lotto. I won $1 million. You're thinking, fuck. Yeah, I'm so happy for you. You're awesome. You deserve it. And you can hear they're full of shit. You know, have you cleaned your room? Of course I have, Mum. I've definitely cleaned my room. No, you haven't. You're lying to me. I can feel it. I can see that you're lying. How did you learn how to do that? That's instinct. That's that psychotic insight. Okay. And judgment is a huge one. Doesn't matter what your clients say. If it triggers you, you've got to somehow block it. Okay. Everyone has an opinion. Anything else, guys, you might do that might trigger this? Is this making sense so far? Does this give you a better definition of rapport? This rapport, this really senseless rapport stuff that has no meaning or no weight to it, like just smile and everything will be okay. I'm a friend, you're a friend, we both have shoes type thing, is ridiculous. I'm more worried about, am I triggering any psychotic insight? When did I switch from being Courtney the human being who's generally a nice person to Courtney the therapist? Now she's trying to do something. As soon as you make that switch, if you find yourself doing that, take a step back, chill out, relax, be a human being again, but with all the insight of a real masterful therapist. Does that make sense for this part, guys? Okay. All right. So this comes back to the thinking strategy. What are some important principles that you should be drilling into your mind on a daily basis? I don't care if you're saying them out loud or you start to live through it to be an incredible therapist. Psychotic insight's a big one. That'll help a lot. What other things are important to really know, master, and believe to help you become a better therapist? Be genuine. So what does genuine mean? Let's define that. What do I mean by genuine? Because people can fake it.
Being actively engaged in what your client's showing you and telling you.
Yeah. Isn't that the total opposite to what every other therapist is doing? Because what are most therapists taught to do? The language patterns, force the techniques, force the regression. You're now forcing things, where instead we're saying, how about you just be curious about what your client's saying? Have not even just listen, but just become absorbed in what they're saying. Don't try and solve it, but just listen. Listening goes such a long way, but we're too busy. Yeah, curious. We're too busy trying to solve things or come up with what we think is best for them before we actually listen. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. What other thinking strategies are important? The big one is, and I can't say this any other way, just literally stop caring. Not in a cold way, but realize the more you care about your client, the more you're doing them a disservice. Would you guys agree with that? And why would that be? You don't have to agree with it. You're free to think your own thoughts, but why do you think that could have a negative?
When you care, you get invested in trying to fix the problem. And also you end up trying to force solutions. Mm-hmm. You get judgmental about things. I mean, it kind of opens up a whole list of issues.
Yep. And that's all negative for us, isn't it?
Mm.
I'm not saying don't care about your clients, but there's sympathy and empathy. You've got to judge between those two. If I care too much about Crystal's well-being and her solution, what am I now going to do? I'm going to try and force it to make it happen quicker, and the opposite will happen. I'll try and give her the best solution, even if I've went through the same thing. Even though mine was a symptom and hers was a symptom, now I turn into fix-it mode. Very hard to be a good therapist when you're trying to fix it. And what have we said in ACH all along? Do not fix things. Just listen. Okay? Yeah, you're presuming an outcome. But as soon as you start to fix it, what are you now going to do? Trigger the insight, psychotic insight, that now you're trying to do something. Who likes to be told what to do? No one. Do you think a client's unconscious mind likes to be told what to do, despite what mentors and gurus say? The unconscious mind is your slave. You can tell it what to do. Try this for an experiment. Everybody for the next 30 days, tell your unconscious mind it's a millionaire 20 times a day in 30 days' time. Please let me know what's happened. It's a ludicrous exercise, but that's what we're told. That's how the unconscious mind works. Who realizes the unconscious mind is extremely stubborn? It's not a slave to anything. It has the last say. What do we know with ACH? We present something to it, and it's either going to like it or not. We don't say you must change, which is you are now a non-smoker. That's traditional. What we're saying is, hey, unconscious mind, good job so far. Have you thought of this as an option? See the difference? Okay. Instead of selling it, we're offering it. Okay. So when you stop caring and you're just there and you just wait to see what happens, you stop turning into fix-it mode. Okay. What other good thinking strategies would be important? Just think back to ACH days. What else have we really drilled in?
I really like all roads lead to Rome.
What does this help with? When you think about that, does it take the pressure off you guys?
Yeah, you don't get attached to getting a result or how you get there or what question. It's just like, oh, well, whatever I ask them, they'll get there in the end. So it's like I'm not responsible for their result.
Yeah. What body language would represent pressure? Leaning forward, speeding up, the sweating, the touching of the hands, the rocking back and forward, although that might be something else we need to talk about, jokes aside. Do you see what I mean? You're triggering psychotic insight. So if you just stop caring, knowing that you'll eventually get somewhere, and I'll also bring this idea up, stop trying to make it one session. Stop trying to make it 45 minutes. When you try and do that, the opposite will happen. Stop trying to find the right question. You'll get to a point where you trust what comes out of your mouth, even if it doesn't make no sense and there's a lot of expletives and swearing and rude metaphors in it. But you say it and a client goes, oh, wow. And you think, oh my God, I probably shouldn't have said that. That's you conscious again. Whatever comes out of your mouth. It's like when we talk about the asking a question no one else wants to ask. That's really important. Okay. So remember, put pressure on yourself to try and solve it, which is one of the worst things to do. I think that's probably top 3 things you should do. You put pressure on yourself. You then put pressure on your client. They put more pressure on you. You stop asking good questions. They start giving you bad answers. And you think, what's wrong with my clients or my client? They're not answering the questions. It's because you're asking bad questions. You're trying to force something. So stop it. But if you just sit back and think, you know what? Just throw this question out there. And then you look at your client thinking, why haven't they answered me? And they're halfway through a trance, twitching and drooling on themselves. And you think, oh my God, what was that question? I'm going to write it down. Don't write it down because it's the context that allowed that to happen. That's just a little side note. Okay. So don't solve it. Stop caring. All roads lead to Rome. What else? There's a couple of really juicy ones.
What about look for the conflict as a principle?
It's a big one. You learn to understand, and we'll talk about this more tomorrow, which is what we call categories of thinking. Okay, and a little insight now is it's the difference between someone thinking and a thought. So let's talk about this now. Let's come up naturally. What's the difference between thinking and thought? I'll give you a bit more context. Courtney is my client, and I say, so Courtney, what's the problem? Probably shouldn't do that. That might be hypnotic, the insight. I go, what's the problem? She says, I want to quit smoking because it's disgusting. That quick. Is that thinking or thought?
That's thoughts.
Thought. So if we took a metaphor for thought, would you guys agree that thought is stuck? It's something they've thought about over and over again. It's become real. Stuck. Very hard to shift a client's mind when they're stuck. Who drives a car? Have you ever tried to turn the wheel full 360 when the car's in park and not on? Very hard to move the car, isn't it? You turn the engine on, put it into reverse or drive, take the handbrake off, all of a sudden you can do it with one finger because I've got momentum, I've got movement. So now we say in ACH, we say, yeah, it's rehearsed. We say in ACH, start where your client is, like what's the problem? Not where do you want to take them? Because I ask, what's the problem? Courtney says this. Then I ask another question. She says this, and then this. I'm getting momentum. I'm getting movement. I'm making the problem malleable. It's very easy to shift, quote unquote, when the thing's malleable. So let's do the opposite. I say to Courtney, so what's the problem? And she says, well, thinking or thought?
Thinking.
So I want to keep her on track with thinking answers. If I hit a dead end and she answers a question without thinking, that's just another version of an unconscious moment. I can delete that. So what if it's no longer just understanding unconscious moments, but it's also categorizing, was that thinking or thought? And I'll give you a bunch of different categories. We'll get down to the nitty gritty so you'll know what your client's saying even before they say it. We'll get to that tomorrow. But thinking and thought's impossible. If I can get my client thinking, make the problem malleable, it starts to shift and change. Because all in all, what's our job as a therapist? Is our job as a therapist to solve the problem or just to introduce choice? Which one is it? Okay, introduce choice, get things moving again. The problem can no longer be the same. If I'm sitting here in front of my microphone and that's the problem, if they've somehow moved to the right of the microphone, it cannot be the same theoretically because I can see it in a different position. So choice is a big one, and it comes back to the ACH principle, which is don't try and solve it. Just try and introduce choice again. The problem is conscious, not the problem is what they're thinking. It's not thought, which is conscious or unconscious information. Is unconscious information thinking? Would you guys agree? Of course, because to get that information unconsciously, what do they have to do? They have to think about it. And the longer Courtney stays in that thinking phase, what does that mean? Where has she just gone into? Trance. So that gap between me asking the question and her thinking about the answer, this gap is trance, is it not? Because she'll lose space and time. She'll lose who she is for 5 seconds. That's trance. So if I can get her thinking about the answer and stop giving me the verbatim ones that she's practiced over and over, eventually I'm going to get to the right stuff. Does that give you guys a really clear understanding of conscious and unconscious information, our better understanding? It's just getting a client thinking. Okay. Is that Dorothy? Yeah, sorry, my glasses smudged. Dorothy, sorry, go for it.
Thank you. So I actually did a session with a man yesterday, and I just have a question with this happening to see if I'm understanding what happened right. So he came in with the problem. We started talking about it, and he kind of went around and around. And I just kind of kept asking the questions from any unconscious moments I saw. Yeah. And I didn't feel like we were really getting anywhere. But then I stopped and asked him, okay, what's happening with the problem? And he kind of furrowed his brow and he said, well, I feel kind of distanced from it. Like, I know it's there, but I don't feel it as much. I don't feel it the same. So would you say that's a good example of movement?
That's exactly the perfect example.
Okay.
Had you tried to solve it, you now forced him. But you got feedback, which is what I tell you guys to do. You ask a couple of questions, you get feedback. And now a client says, I feel, what was the words he used? I feel distance. What was the words he used?
Distance or disassociated, yeah.
Yeah. I know it's there, but I feel a bit dissociated. Did you do that to him? No. Did you tell him to disassociate? No. Did you tell him to move away from the problem? No, because that's traditional rubbish. Float above your timeline. Go into trance. That's forced. He did those things, and all you did was just ask a question. Now, what did you ask?
So then,
who knows? It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I don't even remember.
And that's why it worked, because you weren't trying to do anything. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So then what happened next was I took that as a good sign, and we just kept going. And then within, I don't know, 20 more minutes, all of a sudden he said, I asked him a question and he acted like he knew the answer, but then he said, I can't think of any words. And then, and I could tell he felt silly and stupid. And so I reassured him that that was actually a good thing, because we were at the end of the conscious awareness and we were getting into subconscious. So then we kept going a little bit longer. And then he literally, he expressed it as, I feel like my mind just spilled out of my head and I don't even know what, and we had to stop. There's no way I could test. There was like, he was literally done.
Yep. You've exhausted.
But
yeah, great.
Right. And so I could tell by the look on his face that he was so confused, but he was like, there's no way we could have continued. And I just attempted to reassure him that that was a good place to be.
Yep.
And gave him the processing chat.
Yep.
But you could like that, we definitely didn't see a solution or a resource.
Does that matter?
Well, yeah, when you say that's just introducing choice. So I'm trusting that that's what's happening.
Well, where does he have to go to get choice? That place or consciousness?
Right.
And remember what I've said, some solutions happen on the spot. Some might take 30 days. That's the whole process. Remember what I've said? I've said, you push a client into that room of choice, just let him go. So I'll paraphrase what you said to this client, which is perfect. We can say, that's a good thing. It's better to be here than be conscious. You're right at the edge of where you need to be. Another way of saying that is a client says, I feel really confused. I don't know where I am. Another way to say that is, I know.
Okay.
And then when
that's what I was asking is, how do you reassure them in a way that you don't sound like you're talking them out of feeling what they're feeling, right?
Yep. You show these things, teeth. You smile.
Okay.
And inside your head, you're going, good, brilliant. If you want to give a suggestion, it could be, great, just stay there for a bit. No rush. You've heard me say no rush. Don't rush this. It's the same as any old traditional trance. It just looks totally different. Where you took him is in this room where there's multiple suits. You just let him go. He might take a week before he finds the right suit. Remember, your only job is to push them into that processing room. But your instinct was absolutely correct. Sometimes a client gets to this place where there's no need for talking anymore, and the session's done because they're exhausted. That's a great thing. You give him the processing chat like you did. He goes and sleeps, spends a couple of days. Before long, one or two things are going to happen. He's either going to call you back and say, hey, it hasn't worked. That's fine. Just means he found the wrong suit. Or he's going to say, you'll never guess what's happened. This has been brilliant. It doesn't matter. But that's what I mean about some problems. Clients will sit there with their problem where they become so consciously exhausted, well, there's no need for words anymore. They're beyond words. If you're going to use something hypnotic, that's a brilliant place to be. So the way you talk someone out of that is by talking too much and trying to explain things. Just go back to the process instructions, which is, good, I know. There you go. If he starts to blink his eyes and start to sway, all the way now. I'm just saying all the way, go into that room, go right to the back. The best suits are in the back, go all the way into it. And if he wants to close his eyes, there you go. But I'm not saying now that you're breathing and with every breath, your eyes get heavier. I can't even do it as a joke because it sounds ridiculous, but you get my point. You will talk them out of that. The thing you should be very proud of is he went there. You didn't tell him to. That was all his choice unconsciously. That's the good stuff. And there's no pressure on you. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And that helps. The biggest question I have was, I just felt that need to reassure him.
That's fine.
That he was in the good place. And I thought, and then, I could almost see him wondering, is this going to do anything?
Yeah. And that's just a conscious, you did the right thing. It's fine to say those words, but you want to shorten it. If I was being nitpicky, which is what Mac's about, how could you, How could you, I'll throw this at you. How could you reassure somebody that where they are is exactly where they need to be with the least amount of words? What could you say? There's nothing wrong with what you did said, but let's be picky. What could you say with the least amount of words?
Well, what you said is just good job.
Yeah.
You're doing great.
There you
Keep
go.
going.
Doesn't that express more than you're in the right place, you're right on the edge of consciousness? They might not understand these words, but if you put a big old smile on your face and you look at them like, yes, thank you, you're in the right place. I'm excited for you now. Good job, client. Don't rush this. And a client might come back and say, well, I don't know if this works. I don't know. I know. There you go. Just ignore.
So even if they come back
Which
with
they
this
will.
doubt.
Which
Okay.
they will. Because remember,
Okay.
if you keep using those processing structures, you'll eventually, you're just letting the unconscious mind slowly take over. What you don't want to do is say, no, don't think about that. Everything's fine. Everything's great. You're amazing. You deserve millions of dollars. None of that shit. Process instructions. And I'm sorry if I keep picking on that, but it's funny. Who cares? Okay. But the way you're looking at me now, smiling with this like, yes, I'm learning something great. Give that to your client because it's all non-verbal. That'll come across more as trying to explain consciousness.
Okay.
Now, what's funny is, like you said, I don't even know what I said. That's why it worked with your client. If you wrote down everything you said and then took that into the next client, do you think it would work? Hell no.
No, absolutely not.
It's a different context. The worst thing we can do is think that it will. And that's the whole, I'll bring my binder of scripts with me.
And it is starting to get easier. I've been doing this for literally 4 months, and it's just very gradually starting to get easier for me to just not think.
Yep.
So I'm hoping
that's what it'll be. And people can attest this. I know Ivan said this a lot of times. You get it, and you don't get it. You get it, and you don't get it. You get it. I'm still like that. Because you violate those things. But these are very intricate rules. Okay? But where you took your client, however you got them there, just let that happen naturally on the next one too. And it just gets easier and easier.
It's good to hear.
Good job.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Austin, go for a minute.
Hey there, Scotty. How's everything?
Good.
Yeah, so just echoing on this idea of curiosity, right? I had a client about, I think this was almost a week ago.
Okay.
And he was having just issues with his sex life, and somehow we got on the topic of his ex.
Okay.
And I could just sense that he wanted to talk about that, and just being very curious about it. That happened almost 3 years ago, and it was literally through this conversation and him just explaining about his ex, that he just literally got it. He's like, wow, the fact that I was able to get out of the depression that the heartbreak caused me, the fact that I was able to get out of the anxiety that it caused me, like I was the one that did that, like the willpower. And I was like, yes, that was you. And then it was just like, just that flip switch. And then I tell him, I'm like, yeah, the willpower. And I'm like, so what happened to being afraid?
Yeah.
And he stops for a second. He goes, oh my God, I see what you did there. And I'm just like, I'm just bringing you back to that.
Yeah.
Bringing you back to the unconscious, right? Like you had such an ACH, like just, they're trying to get out of this box, like just bring them right back into this box where they're processing. And for a lot of clients, it's like it'll be like a phrase or just like a one specific word.
Yep.
I had another client that was something about disconnect, just disconnect in his life and disconnect here and with his relationship, with his marriage and this and that and that. And then he's processing and he would close his eyes. I swear he would be 5 minutes in trance. And I didn't say anything because he was really, really analytical. And I don't know if you'd agree with this, but for the people that are very analytical, what I found to be like one of the things that helps me get out of my own way, because I can also get analytical with them, is just say the least amount of words. And even if they're processing, I just don't say anything. Like I don't say a word.
Yeah.
He comes out, he's like, yeah, and then this happened. I'm like, yeah, disconnect. Right back into trance.
Yeah.
Another 5 minutes. Comes back out and he's like trying to give me fluff, and I'm like, yeah, and the disconnect. And he's like, and again going right back. So it's just like these like little key words. And so I can see how one, the curiosity, and one, just putting them back into that box.
Yep.
And also the idea behind just being very good at listening to them. Like, yeah. I think It's one of the things that I struggled with for a long time.
Yep.
Just being able to listen to my clients because they have so many things to say, and it's these little things.
Yeah.
The nuances of what they express that are the key to that transformation. And so, yeah, just kind of giving some feedback on that. And again, just seeing a lot of analytical clients and the verbatim of what they say, it could almost be getting lost in that stuff. And again, trying to solve their problem.
Yep.
Kind of gets you sucked into that, and then just realizing, oh God, there we go again.
And it shows you it's easier than what we make it out to be. But here's something interesting. We can learn to be a great listener, which is fine. But tomorrow we'll take it to another level where I'll show you how to listen and categorize at the same time what they're saying, so you become 2 or 3 steps ahead of your client. You'll ask a question that would normally in ACH be asked 3 minutes from now, but you ask it now, and you push them quickly towards a solution unconsciously. So there's different categories I'm listening out for. It's just another step above where just listening. Listening's good and listening's fine, ACH style, but what you do with that, that's as close to Erickson as we can get you. Okay. But is it interesting that when your clients turn around and say, or they infer that you told them or you came up with. Hey guys, thanks for watching the video. But before you go, make sure you've headed over to our website and enrolled in our free programs. I'll leave a link below. All you need to do is go over to scottjansen.com.au, come up here to the menu, guys, come down to free programs, and you can enroll straight into our free conversational hypnosis and business trainings. As you can see, we're going to give you instant access to 2 of our intros to 2 of our main courses, I should say, a 100K coaching program, and also an intro into our advanced conversational hypnosis program. There's well over 12 hours of content, plus a lot of free stuff you guys can get your hands on. Thanks for watching.